Total War games have a history of receiving multiple expansions per game, and with time, they've really come to vary in size and scope, as some of them are mere free DLC or paid DLC with minor additions, to fully fledged expansion campaigns. Love it or hate it, I think Creative Assembly and Total War's approach to expansions could really use an update and a reapproach, as the main and biggest issue with Total War expansions is that they as a rule never really build on each other, nor contribute new mechanics and features to existing campaigns. If that sounds too complicated, let me give you some examples. The beloved Kingdoms expansion for Medieval 2 is excellent and does a lot to enhance their individual campaign experiences. But in truth, Kingdoms doesn't really add any new mechanics to the game other than to perhaps reorient existing ones, and it certainly does nothing to change the vanilla Medieval 2 campaign with new cities, factions, units, or mechanics. In the same vein, Napoleon, technically a standalone expansion to Empire, does nothing to fix Empire's issues or add new mechanics to that main game. A quick look at Paradox games, experiences known for their near decade-long longevity, and we see just how different the approach to expansions and updates is. Paradox games are almost constantly patched and updated, and new expansions or DLCs do not add new campaign maps, but instead add new mechanics and features that enhances the experience for most or all factions on the map at any time. Without buying a single DLC, playing Total War Attila in 2023 will probably provide you with virtually the exact same experience as the one you got in 2015. But if you try the same with EU4, or any of the Paradox titles of the past 12 years, playing with or without the updates spell completely different games, an actual world of changes. Despite many people having problems with Paradox DLC policy, I'm personally a fan of it. I love that I can buy the base game once, find it amusing, and then look forward to years of updates and improvements, some of them paid for sure, but still, it feels fun and exciting to look forward to the future and be part of a living and ever-evolving game. It's why EU4 has become perhaps my favorite strategy game of all time, and why Crusader Kings 3 might one day surpass CK2 in depth and complexity. Now you might ask what the heck I'm talking about here. A quick look at the Warhammer games, or indeed even the Total War Saga Troy, shows us that Total War games receive DLCs that expand the main campaign. And this is true to a certain extent. Warhammer 3 has received a few key updates which have reworked how certain factions work, sure. But the main and really only bulk of Warhammer 3 DLC is made up of selling new factions in a piecemeal fashion, with new legendary lords and playstyles being the main selling point. Similarly, a Total War Saga Troy saw the expansion of its faction roster over the course of a year or two, but here too we see the same phenomenon. New factions are introduced with their own mechanics, but Total War expansions rarely, if ever, introduce new game-wide features that make every faction more fun to play at the same time. The introduction of the Amazons as a playable faction doesn't inherently change anything for Agamemnon, for example. And while I do appreciate that factions are unlocked, which does bring more overall variety to the game, mainly because each faction in later Total War games is so unique, it doesn't change or improve upon the fundamentals of the games. What I want in the future are both free and paid updates for Total War games that seek to improve the main experience, no matter which faction you play as. This not only tells the player that Creative Assembly is in this thing for the long term, but it also has the opportunity to completely change how Total War games are perceived. The best example of both development approaches is ironically Rome 2, the game that was in most need of and received the largest amount of main game updates. Picture this. Rome 2 has more than a handful of expansions on its own, and these are mostly larger campaigns as well. Caesar in Gaul, Hannibal at the Gates, Augustus, Wrath of Sparta, Empire Divided, and Rise of Rome. All of these are potentially exciting and fun expansions because they entirely change the faction makeup of the campaigns, and sometimes even provide entirely new maps into the mix. But sadly, most of them do nothing to really spice things up overall. Caesar in Gaul could have done even more to introduce meaningful differences and honors between legions, and to a much bigger degree introduce a system of supply lines and fortifications, which were vital for Caesar's victory there. Hannibal at the Gates had the golden opportunity to completely revamp how vassals and allies work in Rome 2, but added nothing to tie the Romans and Etruscan or Italic factions closer together, other than just making them allies, which remain impossible to integrate or treat differently to this day. Perhaps the biggest offender is Empire Divided, which although offering a great campaign, really should have been an expansion for Attila, and failed to introduce a system of governors or any interesting mechanics related to the emperors. At the same time, Rome 2 is the very Total War game where there is precedence for changing up the main game through updates and expansions. Creative Assembly not only massively fixed the main performance and AI issues at launch, which makes it all the more sad that Attila didn't get the same performance treatment, but Rome 2, over the course of years, received updates to its political and family system, actually giving us a proper family tree with a variety of options and dividing the various political assemblies into tangible factions. Empire Divided also introduced the banditry mechanic to Rome 2, which is a fun way of portraying lawlessness in decentralized cities or provinces where the player has low control. These are the types of updates I want to see more of, as I believe it's one of the main reasons why the tide has shifted when speaking of Rome 2. There will always be a group of people hating this game, and I do understand the criticisms. Rome 2 is still certainly not what I wanted from it, and it's likely to forever border its massive potential. But Rome 2 has changed a ton since launch, especially in terms of Total War games. But despite this launch, Rome 2 deserved and continues to deserve so much more. If CA has no intention of making Rome 3 in the next 3 years, I wish they would return to Rome 2 and to change up a whole lot of stuff. I want them to implement Attila's governor system, Attila's decimation and army loyalty system, population systems, supply systems, new diplomatic interactions, and an entire vassal system revamp. If you think all of this sounds crazy, that's only because Total War has never really dared to change up their games that much over the course of the series' lifetime. But again, there are games out there that have set precedences for this type of update system actually working wonders for games. Paradox again are able to transform their games into decades-long dynamic experiences because it dares to try new things and to invest into years-old titles. On the other hand, we have games that are utterly broken on launch like No Man's Sky, but which over the past 5 years or more now have developed into something completely different. In this sense, Rome 2 is not too different from No Man's Sky. The only difference is that while they both were fundamentally patched to actually work properly, No Man's Sky's fundamental experience was updated, expanded, and improved upon, and so much of it even for completely free, while Rome 2 saw most of its expansions go into making separate campaigns slightly different from each other. I am having fun in Hannibal at the Gates or Empire Divided because of the change in geopolitics and what that might do to the experience, not because I now have the ability to play the game differently with new opportunities or abilities, and certainly not because new updates bring with it new possibilities for new main campaigns, which, let's face it, always remains the most versatile and exciting due to its sheer size and variety. It is the main campaign for a reason after all, and I think it's high time that CA and Total War games started acting like it. But what do you think? Should Total War expansions change, or are they fine as is? Let me know in the comments, and make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like, which really means a lot for the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!